Ghostlore is a fun little indie ARPG with an eastpunk style. It's got a bright and colorful pixelated world, and plenty of damage pixels if destroying enemies is your style. And yes, there's even a fair bit of pixelated loot to pick up afterwards. Now personally, I've followed this game since its beta, and quite enjoyed it. It's the perfect sort of title to play when you don't want to have to deal with getting into a game and taking 100 hours to learn it, and then taking another 100 to just put a build together and taking another 1,000 after that to get good. No. This is, you start up the game, it's very straightforward to get into playing, you pick your class, you're good to go. Then after a relatively short story-based campaign, you're into the endgame, running 2 different loops of content. Shorter missions for the Institute, and the longer Hellgate Island, which is a series of connected levels. Both have quite a bit of scaling, so you can really push your build to the max. And recently, with Update 1.1, Ghostlore added quite a bit of new content. For example, a while back, the developers asked in the Discord what were people's experiences with legendary or mythic items in other games. You know, the chase items, the headhunters, the really cool things that you might hope to get, or that once you get, the game feels awesome. Because they added their own versions of these items. The idea behind them being something that's cool and iconic without necessarily just being objectively powerful due to its stats. An approach that I personally really enjoy. In addition to this, there were quite a few quality of life updates. For example, you now get a respec book as part of a main story. So if you start a class and you decide, this isn't really for me, or you just want to change up your build, you can do that without grinding up the gold. There's basically loot goblins, a secret vendor, portals to the end of a level, and character customization. So let's take a look at that first. Here's my lovely character wearing all sorts of crazy items that I happen to have picked up. And you can see, this is my helmet. It's a green hood. If I swap to this mask, well, now I'm wearing a gas mask that definitely does not go with my hair. And then I'm back to the helmet because, let's be honest, the stats are better. At some point, I'd like to see some sort of transmog system. But for now, just being able to see stuff on my character is pretty cool. And speaking of those mythic items, here's an example. The Rudraksha Mala. It grants the Rudraksha Mala Mandala at a fixed position when equipped. And a lot of the legendary items do this. So you have a variety of skills which you can customize via your skill grid. Think of a sphere grid from Final Fantasy. And Exorcist has the Mandala skill. This is a magical buff that you stand in to gain some skill damage and basic attack damage. But if you're not an Exorcist, and you still want to use the mandala, in the past you had to sacrifice something else. Now, you can just put on the necklace, like so. This appears and definitely messes up my plans because I forget what was there. It's slightly weaker than the Exorcist version. Very, very slightly. As you can see, 30% versus 25. However, here's the really cool part. It's an aura. I just have this buff aura now. I don't have to hit the button, which is awesome. And I love this item. This is one of my new favorite things because you get the permanent buff aura as opposed to, so if I were to cast the Mandala skill, it's just on the ground. I get the buff, then I move out, then I get the buff again. No. Now, permanent buff on. You do give something up. In my case, the amulet that I was using before I got this wasn't very good, so I'm not actually losing that much. But if you have a really good amulet, you're definitely going to be giving something up. But it's a small price to pay for a permanent buff. And a lot of the other legendary items are very similar. The Trishula, for example, gives you the Trishula Radiant Spears when equipped. So this is another effect that causes these little sky beams. Look at them, they're so cute, they chase enemies. And it's a completely different version of the Sentinel's Radiant Spear skill. I especially like this approach because it means most of the legendary items in the game aren't powerful because of their objective stats. Don't get me wrong, their stats are often good, but they're powerful because they do cool and new build-enabling things. Now, I'd much rather that approach. So here are a few others. Lord Shiva's Tiger Skin. It gives you a special Were-Tiger transformation that allows you to cast any skill, unlike the normal Were-Tiger transformation that limits what skills you can cast. Then there's something that gives all of your projectiles a homing property. This is especially effective for projectiles that normally have a wide AoE spread that you want to use for single target damage. Arrival is one of a few mythic items that honestly I'm not too thrilled about. Increasing the crit hit multiplier by up to 200% of 4 seconds of not attacking. Let's be honest, this is an ARPG. We're never not attacking, and with a 0.18 base attack speed, you're especially never not attacking with this item because it's literally just going to be faster than walking to constantly hold your right click. There's definitely a few effects like this that personally I think fall a little flat and could be reworked. And then there's stuff like Way of No Way, which is awesome, and I'm going to equip it to show you. It gives you a combo meter. You activate this combo meter by using your skills in sequence. So that's 1 chain, 2 chain, 3 chain, 4 chain. Oh, and there we go. We hit full combo. And once you hit full combo, you deal double damage. It is very cool that not only are these unique martial arts weapons, and yes, there are new weapon types in the game, but they added a combo meter just for this one thing. It's so cool. That is a perfect segue into some of the new weapons. In the past, you had a very limited selection of weapons in Ghostlore, and this has been massively expanded. Now, some of them honestly aren't that different from before. A good example of this is the axe. It's not that different from a previous weapon. Same with this. It's not too different from a kukri. Then you have things like the staff, completely new weapon type. You have things like the gauntlets. Gauntlets, martial arts, you punch and kick. If you're running the spells going off, that is just something else with my build. It is not tied to the weapon. The weapon that I've been enjoying by far the most is the staff, because look at this. Look at this. Just spin, 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 win, win, win. You are a spin to win build. You can attack while moving, and you hit pretty much everything around you, which is super awesome. Now, in addition to this, there's also loot goblins, these little guys. They run around, they have a question mark, question mark, question mark above their head, and they have a lot of health. So your job is, of course, to reduce that health to 0 to get the loot they're carrying. Another new update are boss portals, because in the past, some of the bigger maps were kind of a pain. You had to go all the way through to the very far end of the map, and then at the very far end, you kill the boss and you get the reward, which led to a lot of players going, I don't want to spend that much time going through. So instead, what they do is just either run through, or when they got a longer map, exit, and try again. Neither of which is the most healthy in terms of gameplay. So now, after you've killed a certain number of enemies, which does scale a little bit, so large maps are a little bit longer, but after you've killed a certain number of enemies, you get a portal to the zone's boss. This means you honestly don't have to rush through unless for whatever reason you're trying to avoid combat, which is probably still a viable strategy for some Hasashin builds. And long maps aren't nearly as problematic. This is a really nice quality of life update, and I'm very happy to see it. There's also a fun little purple portal that if you go in, you fight a bunch of waves of enemies, and you probably get destroyed because that is pretty brutal. Another fun new feature that I almost forgot, there are now pets. You get a little pet slot here. You can find several different pets as you play. As you can see, there's a chicken. This guy, there's a couple more to find. An adorable little otter. The other thing you can do with pets, they have an inventory. You can use them to store items that you might want to keep for later. Just like this. Maybe I'll need that. You know what? I might need this one as well. Accuracy and minion health. You can sort it. It's just like a secondary inventory. So if yours fills up, you can put it in your pets. Or you can just, fill your pet's inventory with all the junk that you can't be bothered to deal with. Oh, I don't need this. I don't need this. All right, that one might be worth saving. This one's clearly terrible. Then just click the Sell All Items button, which works even if you're not in town. So if you're in the middle of a dungeon and your inventory fills up, just count on your pet to bail you out. Though much like in Torchlight, they will disappear for a little bit and then return to pick up gold and other collectibles after, of course, selling your items. Oh, look, he's back. So in short, the 1.1 update brought a lot of cool stuff to Ghostlore. If you played the game when it came out or when it entered early access, now's a great time to come back, try the new stuff, maybe some mythic items. If you do, you find a really cool one and make a build around it, please let me know down below. I want to know what more of the mythic items do and what cool builds they can enable. On the other hand, if you've never played Ghostlore before, and you're watching this video roughly around when it airs, this is one of the best times to pick up the game because it's going on sale. It's going to be 40% off from September 6th to October 2nd, 2024. Personally, I think it's well worth it, even if a standard price of $20, but hey, when it goes on sale, that means it's an even better deal. There are a few more little features and fun quality of life things that were added for 1.1, but I'll leave those for you to discover for yourself. For now, I want to change topics slightly. Instead of talking about the game, talk about the build that I'm playing. So I've played a few builds in Ghostlore before. I've tried most of the classes, but there's one that I haven't really played very much, and that's Geomancer. Mostly because the leveling experience was pretty rough and it just never stuck with me. I have good news and bad news. The bad news is the leveling experience is still pretty rough, so I'd actually recommend leveling as a different class and using your respec book to swap to Geomancer later, or picking up Geomancer as a secondary class. It's rough mostly because the Geomancy skills, while they do hit hard, cost a lot of mana. So in the early game, you won't really have the mana sustain, nor the skill sustain, to constantly spam these, and auto-attacking is a little bit rough because you're offered access to far fewer defensive and quality of life benefits than many of the other classes like, let's just say, Feral or Hasashin, both of whom are excellent leveling characters. The good news is, it's really fun in the endgame, because Geomancy does absolutely massive damage. Like 9 times 3,674 to 4,457. If all of the shockwaves hit, which most of the time they won't, but some will overlap, that's like 40,000 damage at the top end. Which we are talking blood magic levels of damage, and blood magic, the feral skill, which you can see here, this little cone, is also very powerful and highly damaging. But blood magic is relatively close range, whereas this, it's basically like Sunder from PoE. It's a line of damage and it does a lot. Plus, if you need more long-range DPS, Lightning Storm's a pretty good option. Geomancer for the core of my damage skills, which early on was Geomancy Thunderstorm. Later on became a mix of Geomancy and Blood Magic, since that skill hits way too hard. Feral for a lot of the defensive and quality of life bonuses, as Feral has some of the strongest defensive passives in the game. And Exorcist to fix all of my mana problems, plus let me cheese bosses. On the right, you can see my skill grid. Basically, it's set up so that the only thing linked to this trigger on basic attack is Blood Magic. If you don't have or don't want to use Blood Magic, you'd put Lightning Storm right there. Then Geomancy is only linked to this one. The Thunderstorm, which I keep calling Lightning Storm, is linked here to trigger on kill, and also here to trigger on damage taken, which is exactly the same setup as Battle Roar. I have tried linking Exercise here. I don't think it's actually worth it, so I'm going to just swap these like so. This way, Battle Roar is the only thing triggered. It should make Battle Roar uptime completely brainless. Then Exercise here is stacked next to all of the Infliction Strength multiplier bonuses with things like Hex and Feedback Loop. The main purpose of Exorcist in this build is Exercise, so if I find a cool Mythic item that gives me a superpowered version of Exercise, I might swap to that, and as long as I can solve my mana, which I guess technically I could just Blood Magic everything, then, you know what, I might drop Exorcist for something else. In general, I would say if you want go-to classes, Feral is really good for defenses, and Hasashin is really good for damage, with all of the others being a little bit more specialized, and you tend to take them more for your skills than their generic bonuses. Now, for my glyphs, I was trying to stack a bunch of Alasa. This gives the 10 to 14 skill damage if you socket a Sona. And just to give you an idea, here's my Sona simple glyph. So there's the 4457, goes down to like 4121. So it's like 7% damage for each of these that are socketed, because that base damage gets multiplied by all the other bonuses. I've also got a few Nasins. This is for the cooldown reduction on hit chance. As the more cooldown reduction on hit you have, the more you can sustain your skills simply by hitting enemies without needing to wait for silly things like cooldowns and recharge time. And then over here, I have some ILOs, not because they're actually super useful for the build, but just because I haven't replaced / rerolled them yet. Now for my items, I'm using a staff. This simply has the smoothest attack pattern that I've found so far. though a super fast weapon like a kukri or a ritual knife also does work very well. In general, I tend to favor fast weapons rather than slow weapons for trigger builds. Fun fact, if you need extra defenses, you can very much use a shield with your kukri or ritual knife. That's not something that you can do with the staff. So that is one advantage of a one-handed setup, but the staff rolls higher cooldown reduction on hit. And then everywhere else, I'm looking for cooldown reduction on hit, health, absorption, and resistances, with a little bit of accuracy mixed in there just to make sure I can hit enemies. So I tended to get quite a bit of cooldown reduction on hit between my belt, boots, and pants. A little bit of skill damage on the ring, a little skill damage on the amulet, and some nice old elemental resistance on both my helmet and, scattered throughout the other items. Though I do think I could use just a little bit more res and maybe a few less damage stats, as honestly my damage is fine, and especially early on, I was dying quite a bit. Not quite as much anymore though, and that's largely thanks to the feral passives. So if we go back here, the fun ones to note, more absorb at low health, more maximum health. Berserker Rage gives more damage at low health. This isn't about survivability, but it's really fun to do more damage. And Adrenaline Rush, when you're surrounded by enemies, you get absorb and attack speed. Plus over here, Metabolism, 60% of damage taken is converted to damage over time, which prevents things from one-shotting you. And over here for food, this is something that I've been actively rolling to improve. The Oyster Omelet is really good for skill damage. Really like that one. Then I've got some Ellie-Res to cap. I think I'm actually going to swap to one more Ellie-Res roll. That should make gearing overall pretty easy, and this saute isn't super, super good. This one's really well rolled. Double damage is good, and buff duration means that your roar is up, even if it's not being cast too frequently. Then here, cooldown reduction on hit and double damage. Hey, it even has some crit hit multiplier. So the basic playstyle is pretty simple. Hold down your right click to spin to win, or at least spin your staff to win. Use your dodge roll if you ever need to avoid damage. And then when you get to a boss, it's time to spam exercise, which I have bound to my number pad 6. You spam exercise to lower the enemy's resistances and their absorb. Once their bonuses are all super, super negative, then you simply nuke them for absolutely massive damage, killing bosses nearly instantly. Overall, this is a pretty darn fun playstyle. Though that said, if you want a little bit more damage, especially as you're gearing up and you're struggling, I recommend hard casting, Geomancy, Thunderstorm, and Blood Magic. They do a lot, and I mean a lot more damage when you are hard casting them manually. But later on, damage isn't going to be a problem, so you can go with the automated version for even more quality of life. So those are my thoughts on Ghostlore 1.1, the cool mythic items that were recently added, and the build that I've been playing to try them out. If you want to see more stuff on cool indie games like this, do be sure to get subscribed. If you like this, do be sure to give it a like. And hey, if you want to know more about Ghostlore, I have a couple other videos that I'll leave up in the card and down below. They're from the release version, so a few things might be slightly inconsistent, but overall the game hasn't changed that much. And they go over the systems in a lot more detail, plus provide a very nice beginner-friendly build. Those will be up in the card and down below. Personally, I think the coolest addition in Ghostlore 1.1 are all of the mythic items. I really like the way they're a build enabler rather than a build replacement, because again, most of the stats on these items are pretty mediocre. You're not going to wear it over a random thing that you've picked up off the ground or crafted, simply for the stats alone. You're going to be wearing it because it gives you a skill that's not available to your classes. Or you're going to be wearing it because it gives you a skill that is, like let's just say with a Were-Tiger form, but not in the way it's available to your classes. Which is to say that the Were-Tiger form from the item allows you to use all spells, whereas normal Were-Tiger restricts your spellcasting. And thinking about it that way, it becomes a really cool build enabler. That's the sort of design that I really like to see, because I don't like it when a game tells me, this is your build now because you found an item that is just objectively better. I like it when a game says, hey, here's a cool sandbox with a bunch of toys in it, play with whatever you want. And that's very much how these items feel right now, though I do think the Mandala Amulet is maybe a little bit too strong, since it's just an aura that moves with you, and some of the others are maybe a little too weak. And also, to be fair, even though the 25% damage increase for a neck slot is pretty good, honestly, a really good crafted neck can probably compete with that, so it's not too broken. But hey, that's about it for me today. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, check out my second channel for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.